Hello and welcome to another video for WinBidPro v16 from GDS Estimating. This one I'd like to talk about part options. So there's other videos on framing systems and on the parts list and things like that, but something to be familiar with and know about in our system is the different options we have. And you can see, so I went to the framing system for the job and I'm editing the framing system for this particular elevation. And if you remember in V16, when I make a change to the system, it asks me if I want to apply it to the whole job in terms of any elevation that uses that same frame, or if you want to make it a independent change that's only for this one elevation. So a lot of flexibility there, but it's good to know those options. So as far as part options go, we can see a little symbol here. And then if I point to one, it shows me exactly what it means. Quantity of parts for these screws. We're in the YKK catalog right now, and this is just one of their curtain wall systems. So I can point to here. It's, let's see what type, but that's another screw, or that's a F anchor maybe, or something. It's hard to tell with their descriptions sometimes, but anyway, we know that there is a quantity of 4 for those two different parts, and then this one here, we know it has an adjustment to the length. So when I point to that, place part every 9 inches, no less than 1 inch from the edge. So that's a spacing kind of part where every so often it gets that part. So we can see all that from this little assembly kind of summary list here, but we can't edit any of those options. So in order to edit an option, we need to click the edit button, edit icon at the top. And this is what gets us into the assembly. It shows us the detail, these other settings here, and this is where we can click on a part. Like any extrusion, you can have options that come up over here. You can even have a quantity if you need 2 of a certain extrusion. Let's say there's an inside and an outside for a glass stop or something like that. Then we could change that to a quantity of 2 for that one part for this particular assembly. So in the way the program handles that is anytime it comes across this assembly for whatever cut length it needs, it's going to look to these options and say, okay, if there's a quantity of 2, it needs to double at that cut length, double the amount of those parts. And so now the other option is you can adjust the length. So a lot of times if it's a pressure plate or something and it needs to be a little bit shorter, or even a face cover, you know, if the face cover overall for that daylight opening or that cut size has to be a little bit shorter, I can say minus, let's say, a 1/16 of an inch. And that's going to, every time that that cut piece is required in an elevation based on the drawing, it's going to deduct a 1/16 of an inch from the overall cut size. So that's what that lets us do. Now this exact length thing is something we would use later on, not necessarily where a stock length is, but let's say it's a hardware, like an extrusion for a perimeter anchor, let's say. So let's just say this particular anchor here comes in an extrusion. In this case it doesn't because it would say extrusion. But if it were, I would say, I guess it's only going to let us do that for extrusion. So okay, let's just say this is an anchor here. And then we need to say, we need an exact length of 6 inches, and then it's going to give us more options. So it's the spacing that's needed then. So each anchor has to be 6 inches in length, but it has to occur, let's say, on center every 24 inches or something. So that's what we're going to say there, and the distance from the end needs to be 6 inches. So it's going to calculate how many of those 6-inch cuts we need from that extrusion for this anchor at 24-inch centers. And it's going to take into account it can't be any closer than 6 inches from each end. So that's going to give you basically the number of cut pieces you need and put it on the cut list for that type of part. So let's see what else. If we've got gasket, you can actually do adjustments to gasket, but then also that would be something that we would do in glazing options. So there's a whole separate video on glazing options for deductions from gasket, like plus or minus so much, even add for overall type of thing. So that's something that's different. That's a whole separate video for glazing options. But for these part options, that's kind of the gist of it. You know, you edit, you go in here, and for different types of parts, so for extrusions, so it's nothing that you'd really, the problem is, here's something to be aware of. If it's like a standard back member or any other type of extrusion that's a normal, you know, storefront or curtain wall extrusion, if we say it has a specific length of, say, 36 inches, and we don't say that it's on center spacing or distance from the edge, it's assuming that that part is only going to be that length. So no matter what your drawing dictates for the use of those parts, it's going to fix it at 36 inches. So you can adjust your opening size, you can you know, add panels, all that kind of stuff, and it would never change the length of that part. So be very aware of that. If you ever do that for an extrusion, it's fixed no matter what. So it overrides anything else that the drawing's doing. So on a typical extrusion, you wouldn't do that. But on an extrusion for hardware, for clips or any other type of thing like that, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to have a specific length cut, and you want it to occur every so many inches. So that's what it's meant for. And remember, so it shows this little symbol here. So plus and minus is showing us we're adding or subtracting to each cut size, and then the little arrows is showing that we're making some other adjustment, and this is like a spacing type of situation. So, and for something like screws, let's say it's curtain wall pressure plate screws, we can actually go in and say the on-center spacing is every 9 inches and it has to be 2 inches from each edge. So that's a very typical use of these part options for hardware, is for pressure plate screws that need to be applied so many inches and so far from the edge. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what part options is, and it's good to know what's available there so that you can really fine-tune all of your hardware in an estimate. Thanks very much. Keep your eye out for more videos on our website.